Diabetes Online Summit. Really glad to have you guys joining us tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It is officially the time. It is officially started.
We're live.
This is as good as it gets here.
So I'm going to launch the poll right here so we can figure out what type of diabetes people are living with today. So let's publish that. You can vote as you come in. We also want to know where you're coming from. Cyrus, what epic location are you going to challenge somebody to come from today?
I would like to see somebody from Mongolia.
Mongolia.
That's what I'm looking for. Yeah.
Okay.
We haven't seen one yet. If you're just joining the room, looks like we have about 180 people here so far, and we're expecting 1,000 people to show up today because more than 5,000 people registered for this webinar. So glad to see you guys are all here. Now we have 315 already. If you're just here, please vote on the poll that you see on your screen here. What type of diabetes are you living with? And then also in the chat box, please tell us where you are coming from, because we love to see the international audience that usually shows up.
Absolutely. Love to see the enthusiasm. People are excited about the summit this year, Cyrus.
Yeah, I can tell. This is like, we've had more registrations this year than we've ever had in the past. And I think part of me feels, I could be wrong, but I think that there's more confusion now than there has been even a year ago or 2 years ago. And, we're going to get to the bottom of the confusion because Robbie and I were confused, had been confused for some portion of our diabetes career, and we got unconfused. And we love to teach people the truth so that you can also be unconfused.
Absolutely. So, I remember there was one night specifically many, many years ago before we had joined Forrester, and we're just talking on the phone, and I'm like, this study says this. Like, what? Why? Like, how? We're like digging into it, like figuring out what's wrong with HOMA. Okay, here's why people are saying improved insulin sensitivity when they're not actually doing that. So much learning over the years.
Correct. There's a lot of misleading information out there, so we're going to get to the bottom of a lot of it for sure. We may not be able to get to all of it today, but we're going to do our darndest to try and answer a lot of your questions, and most importantly, learn from you guys, because we know that there's, you guys are coming in from all over the place, and it's a little late already, so we want to, make sure that we get to everyone's questions. Janice from Quebec, Mary from Kansas City, Jennifer from Baltimore. We got some Alberta, Canada, June. Great to see you guys here. We got 630 people showing up so far. If you haven't had a chance to vote on the poll that you see on your screen right now, please tell us what type of diabetes you are living with right now. It's always interesting to see the distribution between type 1, 1.5 prediabetes, type 2, and gestational. And then oftentimes we even have people who don't have diabetes or are here just on behalf of a loved one, which is fantastic as well.
We already have 18% in that category that either don't have diabetes, and another just say a loved one has diabetes. So over 30%, all right, just interested in learning about this information.
Yep, 30%. Looks like about 45% of you guys are living with type 2 and 15 with prediabetes. So between prediabetes and type 2, we're looking at almost 60% of the audience, which is, actually, I think it's a little low. I was expecting a little higher.
Yep. Type 1 is representing pretty strong here. We got 6%. If you don't know already, both Cyrus and I are living with type 1 diabetes. So glad to see some fellow type 1s in the room.
That's exactly right. Type 1 going strong. We love type 1s. Anybody from Madagascar so far? No? No?
Anybody from Mongolia? Mongolia, yeah. Hey, if you're from Madagascar, I mean, we should give it to him at that point.
Seriously. I'll send you a book.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we got just over 700 people here today. For those of you that are just joining, 2 things. Please tell us where you're from in the chat box, and then also vote on the poll that you see on your screen. In the chat box, actually, we're going to be doing a really interactive session today with you guys. We got a whole collection of questions that we want to ask you. We want to teach you a little bit about who we are and about why we decided to put on the Mastering Diabetes Online Summit for the 3rd year in a row. And but most importantly, we're here to learn about you guys, because this summit wouldn't mean anything if it wasn't for people like you who are trying to learn how to maximize your diabetes health in the short term and in the long term. And like we were saying before, it's a confusing diagnosis, but it doesn't have to be. Just because it's confusing right now does not mean that inherently diabetes has a confusing physiology, because it actually doesn't. It's just that there's a lot of people who are spreading conflicting messages, and as a person living with diabetes, it's hard to know who to believe and what to do and what's good in the short term and what's good in the long term. And so we're going to try and help you out with that today, for sure.
We have Tony from Timbuktu is with us today.
Oh, wow. That could be a winner right there.
That could be. That could be. But yeah, like Cyrus said, I think you were correct in saying that in 2019, I think people are the most confused as they've ever been. I mean, you have the exact opposite being taught from medical doctors, the exact opposite showing testimonials and success stories on the internet. Yep. There's the ketogenic books are selling like wildfire on Amazon. If you go look at the top 100 books, there is a lot of confusion, and we're gonna set this straight.
Okay, so how do you want to go into our stories first, Robbie, and then we can get to some questions?
Let's do it. So let's see what we got on the poll here. We are finishing up with about the same numbers we saw earlier. Type 1 going to 7%, type 2, 41, prediabetes 15, and then a really strong group of people who don't have diabetes, just a loved one who has diabetes. So that's great. Really glad to have you guys with us.
Fantastic. Okay, so now that we're done with that poll, we got almost 800 people in the room today. Like I said earlier, we're expecting about 1,000. So people will probably continue to trickle in as time goes on. What we're going to do now is I'm going to share my screen real quick, and I'll sort of go through my story. Robbie will go through his story, and then we want to learn about your story. All right, so here we go. I'm going to try and share the screen.
You share your screen, Cyrus, and I'll introduce our wonderful people in the chat box. We have Jose in the chat box and Kylie Buckner, a registered nurse. And our director of lifestyle change at Mastering Diabetes, she is in the chat box as well. So we're going to try and answer as many questions as we can and help out. And we're going to have fun tonight.
And that's correct. If at any point you have questions that you would like to have answered, then please just type them in the chat box, and either Jose or Kylie will do their best to answer. And we'll also have plenty of time for Q&A. So we're going to hopefully try and leave no stone unturned. Can you see my screen right now?
Yes, it looks great.
Fantastic. Okay, so welcome. We're super glad that you're joining us. Just in case you don't know who we are, Robbie over here on the left with this beautiful shiny face, and then that's me over here on the right. So when I say me, I mean Cyrus Kambata. I was diagnosed with not one, not two, but 3 autoimmune conditions when I was a senior in college. So I was 22 years old, I was going to Stanford University, and I was simply just trying to graduate and move on with my life. At that time, I got diagnosed with 3 autoimmune conditions within 6 months. The first one was Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. The second was alopecia universalis, which is why I have no hair. As you can see on this slide, I don't have hair, I don't have eyebrows, I don't have eyelashes, I don't have ear hair, I don't have beard hair, mustache, you name it. Nowhere on my body do I grow hair, and it's actually not that big of a deal, other than the fact that it was a signal that there was a sort of underlying inflammatory process in my body that was causing all 3 autoimmune conditions. The third of the 3 was type 1 diabetes. And when I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, I knew immediately that something was inherently wrong with my overall health. So I went to the doctors. They diagnosed me with an extremely high blood glucose. They started giving me insulin. And during the education process, they told me that a low carbohydrate diet is the most effective method of controlling my blood glucose. So they said, don't worry, just as long as you eat the foods that you see on the screen here, more butter, more cheese, more eggs, more bacon, more red meat, more white meat, more fish, more oil, then as a result of that, you're lowering your carbohydrate intake and your blood glucose will be much more controllable and you'll be able to use less insulin. So I said, sounds great. You're telling a 22-year-old guy who already kind of ate mostly all of these foods that you see on the screen to eat more of them. So I did. And the problem was that no matter how hard I tried to control my carbohydrate intake, my blood glucose wasn't cooperating. So my blood glucose meter became a random number generator. Anytime I used it, I would get a value of 40 or 440 or 240. And it got so confusing. This is mind boggling. And having studied mechanical engineering as an undergraduate, I trained myself to learn how to manipulate very complex systems. And this was one system that I just couldn't control. In addition to not being able to control my blood glucose, I got very low energy. I became very anxious and depressed. And the worst part for me was that I couldn't use my body the way I wanted to. Exercise was extremely challenging for me. My muscles hurt, my joints hurt. And having grown up as an athlete, that was the last thing that I wanted to deal with. So after about a year of living this way, I decided to change my diet into something, just try a different approach. And so under the guidance of a very, very smart individual named Dr. Douglas Graham, he taught me how to eat a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet. So he taught me how to eat more fruits and more vegetables and more foods from the plant-based world that are extremely colorful and extremely tasty. So I was very nervous that by eating this way that my blood glucose would skyrocket, because that's what everybody had told me. They said, look, Cyrus, if you eat more carbohydrate, right? If you start out in the 100 grams of carbohydrate per day range, and then you start to increase the carbohydrate intake, then your blood glucose is also going to follow the same pattern, and insulin use is also going to follow the same pattern, because the more carbohydrate you eat, the worse your diabetes control becomes. But that didn't happen. Here's what actually happened. My carbohydrate intake increased, as you can see here in blue, and it went up from approximately 100 grams all the way upwards of 600 grams per day, more than a lot of people with diabetes would eat in a month. And my fat intake dropped significantly. So my fat was at somewhere about 80 grams per day, and it came down to 10, 20, 30 grams per day. And my insulin use fell. It came down dramatically. It started out in the mid-40s, and before 3 weeks was up, I was in the mid-20s. And so this was perplexing to me. It was very exciting, but it was perplexing to me because everybody told me that if you eat more carbohydrate, as you can see in blue, that your insulin use would also do the same thing, but it did the exact opposite thing. So this was the first time that I got introduced to this idea that maybe carbohydrate in your food is important, but not the only variable when it comes to blood glucose control. I did notice that my fat and insulin trends were pretty similar, and that the less fat I ate, shown here in red, the less insulin I needed. So this was the first time I started to think, I wonder if there's a connection between these two variables, because obviously they're both trending in the same direction. So in order to investigate that, I put myself back to graduate school, and I went and I got a PhD in nutritional biochemistry at UC Berkeley. So there I studied for 5 years, and I read thousands of scientific papers on the true causes of blood glucose variability and insulin resistance, which we're going to go into in a lot of detail. But insulin resistance is, think about it as the underlying condition across all forms of diabetes that makes controlling your blood glucose really challenging. So I started to learn about insulin resistance and how do you create it and how do you reverse it and how do you do it using your diet and how do you do it using exercise. And as a result of that, I got a lot of knowledge and a lot of information about how you can really truly overcome diabetes using your food as medicine. So here I am, actually technically now 16 years later. I've reduced my insulin use by 40% since the time I started. Sometimes I eat more than 900 grams of carbohydrate per day, usually somewhere in the 600 to 700 gram per day range. I inject approximately 25 units of insulin per day because I'm going to need insulin the rest of my life unless type 1 diabetes goes away. And my A1C values, this marker of 3-month blood glucose stability, is usually between 5.4 and 5.7. And technically speaking, these are non-diabetic A1C values. And Robbie will also tell you his story when he also lives with a non-diabetic A1C. So long story short, things have drastically improved for me, and I owe 99% of it to a low-fat, plant-based, whole food diet.
Cyrus, will people in the summit learn how to get ripped like you in that picture?
Oh, I just photoshopped these abs on.
Fantastic. I love it. All right. So my name is Robbie Barbero. You might know me on Instagram, social media as Mindful Diabetic Robbie, where I love to share colorful, vibrant pictures of lots of food and share information about this lifestyle. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 12, just about to turn 13. And my older brother actually had diabetes. So I had been complaining to my mom for several weeks. I think I have diabetes just like Steve. She's like, no, 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 don't be silly. And eventually she was out of town and called and asked and said, hey, how's it going? I said, I couldn't sleep last night. I was cramping. She's like, okay, go upstairs, use your brother's blood glucose meter and test yourself. And I was well over 400. As you guys on this webinar know, I'm supposed to be somewhere between 80 and 130. And my brother said right then and there, you have type 1 diabetes, pack your bags, you're going to be in the hospital for a few nights. So that was it. And that time I was following the standard American diet, kept on doing that in the initial years of living with type 1. And I had to take allergy medication year round. And I was still sick every year. I had terrible acne. I tried every treatment you can think of, eventually having to use Accutane, which is really a last-ditch effort for dermatologists. And my parents had to sign a waiver about people committing suicide on that drug. It just wasn't a good situation. I also suffered from plantar fasciitis. And you can see on the screen there, these blue boots. I actually had to wear those boots on both feet while sleeping at night as a competitive tennis player. It was quite frustrating. So those are my initial years with type 1. And the thing that changed my life was this book right here. Please, I'm not recommending this book, okay? This guy ended up in jail. This is not a good book, but it played a big part in my story, and it planted the seed in my mind. I'm not sure exactly what it said or where it said. I can't even find it in the book. I haven't taken the time to reread the whole thing again, but something in that book planted a seed in my mind that maybe if I lived a really healthy lifestyle and I cleaned up my diet, that maybe I could heal type 1 diabetes. Maybe my beta cells could start working again. And I had this mindset of like, look, the smartest people in the world said Roger Bannister could not run a 4-minute mile. And eventually he did, and now lots of people do it. So I think at some point we're going to figure this out. We don't have the solution for type 1 diabetes in our summit. Sorry about that. But we're going to keep on moving forward. And it just changed my life to do, what could I do to live healthily? What could I do to just be the healthiest person I could be, to give my body the best chance of healing itself? And of course, start doing research and come across a low carbohydrate diet. So I initially started following a Weston A. Price Foundation style diet. And this is a program where they taught you got to limit fruits too high in sugar. I had a lot of animal products, grass-fed beef, raw milk. And the reason I moved on from this diet is because nothing really changed in regard to insulin sensitivity. Nothing really changed in regards to my diabetes health. And I kept on learning and doing more research. And the next thing I came across was a plant-based ketogenic diet. Okay, so this is where I was now eating lots of greens, lots and lots of greens, lots of nuts. And I remember anytime I was hungry or I wanted a snack, I would just grab some celery and then go dip it in some almond butter. And that was my snack. And I would do that over and over and over. And on this program, I ended up, the biggest problem there was that I just had no energy. That was the biggest problem. So I did see some improvements in diabetes numbers and control. My blood glucose was a little bit flatter. My overall insulin use went down a little bit, but I just felt terrible. I had no energy. So I ended up going back to a naturopath doctor that I had seen in the past over my journey of trying to improve my health. And she suggested I should do chelation therapy. And this was going to be expensive. I was going to have to drive from Gainesville, University of Florida, to Tampa to get this done. And at this point, look, I'm willing to do anything. I had tried so many different things. I flew to California with my dad to go meet with a special herbalist. He made these teas, and I was drinking those. They smelled so bad, I had to brew them outside of my dorm room because I didn't want to upset my roommates. So I had a little portable oven situation. I'd bring it outside, and I would heat it up. It was terrible. But so at this point, and before I committed to doing the chelation therapy, I heard a podcast while I was driving home. And this podcast changed my life. I found the same person that Cyrus found, Doug Graham. And he was talking about eating fruits and vegetables and how even that could potentially clear out heavy metals. So I'm like, wait a minute, I get to eat all these foods that I've been told I'm not supposed to eat. It's supposed to improve my health, and that's another way to get rid of these heavy metals rather than chelation therapy? Sure, what the heck, I'll try it. So I start working with Doug Graham and literally just start eating tons and tons of fruit. The first week, I literally ate nothing but bananas. This is right around Christmas in 2006. And I remember my grandmother was visiting. And for Christmas dinner, I came down with a plate of peeled bananas, a genuine pyramid of bananas. The bottom was a nice solid base, and you build it up to one banana on the top. And I could see my parents just shaking their head, just thinking, this is just another phase. This is not going to last. And here we are. We're 12 years later. This has definitely lasted. And the reason is because of my quality of life, but the improvement in insulin sensitivity. That is what got me. That's what has kept me here. That's what's been the most important change in my life, in my diabetes health. So when I was doing the plant-based ketogenic diet, I was eating about 30 grams of carbohydrate per day and taking 10 units of insulin. So that's a 3-to-1 ratio over a 24-hour period. So you measure 24-hour insulin sensitivity by taking the total grams of carbohydrate eaten divided by the insulin used, and you have that ratio there. So now, on a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, I eat about 750 grams of carbohydrate per day, use 34 units. That's a 22-to-1 ratio right there. So that is important, and we're going to talk more about that tonight. You're going to hear all about that in the summit, why insulin sensitivity matters, why it is important. So now here I am, 12 years later, my current A1C is 5.3%. I feel great. I don't have to take any other pharmaceutical medications other than insulin. My skin has cleared up. And I just love sharing this information with other people because along this journey, very early in the journey, I realized what I saw in my change in insulin sensitivity, what happened to me, if I could teach other people that, for a vast majority of people living with diabetes, they could literally reverse it completely. For 90 to 95% of people living with diabetes, if you can reverse insulin resistance, you can eliminate the condition from your life. And that's part of the reason we're spreading this message.
I love it, Robbie. While you were talking, by the way, your story never gets old, man. I could listen to that story on repeat. So good. There was a question that came in from somebody that said, how did you and Robbie meet each other? And the answer is that Robbie and I were both given an opportunity to talk at an event in person. So we met up and we had heard about each other and we started to sort of like talk and say, oh, like I've heard about you and I've heard about you. And then before we knew it, we became really good friends. And then we decided that, we would join forces and try and teach people around the world living with all forms of diabetes how they can truly take full control of their diabetes health. And I got to say, like, one of the best decisions of my life, no question.
Of course, I feel the same way, but I got to add to that story, Cyrus. Cyrus was one of the inspirations for me. He was a testimonial in Doug Graham's book. So I heard Doug Graham's podcast. This is before his book had come out. He was talking about, okay, it is going to come out. I pre-ordered it on Amazon. I got the book. I read it all the way through, and Cyrus was one of the testimonials in the back. I went to Google. I looked this guy up, and I could see pictures of him riding his bike, telling his story, like seeing his ripped figure. I'm like, this is great. I showed my parents, like, look at this guy. This is somebody succeeding on this. And then we didn't meet in person until when we did that talk together, but it's really, really inspiration.
Yeah, there we go. The world works in funny ways.
Totally.
Okay. So now that you understand who I am, now that you understand who Robbie is, the question is, what is your experience living with diabetes and other health conditions? Okay, so the first question I want to ask you guys is, what other health conditions besides diabetes are you living with? In the chat box, please go ahead and just type it in. Is it things like hypertension, high cholesterol, dementia, impaired digestion, fatty liver disease, chronic kidney disease, peripheral neuropathy, you name it. Just please put them in the chat box. I just want to see them.
Celiac, rheumatoid arthritis,
high cholesterol, hypothyroidism, high cholesterol, hypertension, fatty liver disease. Okay. Fatty liver, I see that. Hypertension, muscular dystrophy, fatty liver, high blood pressure, hypertension, GERD, acid reflux,
Crohn's,
neuropathy and Crohn's, anxiety, arthritis, migraines, fatty liver, goiter, acid reflux,
neuropathy.
Yeah. RA once again. Obesity, fatty liver disease, osteoarthritis, migraine, PCOS, diverticulitis, thyroid dysfunction, hypertension, high cholesterol, high blood pressure. Okay, so that sounds like I'm reading through the dictionary there. Okay, this is really, 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 really important information because diabetes. My professor in graduate school, my mentor, he turned to me one day. He goes, "Hey, Cyrus, pop quiz." And I said, "What?" He goes, "How many people have died from diabetes?" And I sat there and I was like, "That's a great question." And I said, "I don't know, maybe 10 million." He looks at me, he goes, "Nope, less." And I said, 5 million. Nope, less. 1 million. Nope, less. Like 100,000. Nope, less. The answer, 0. 0 people have died from diabetes. And I was like, "What are you talking about? People die from diabetes all the time." He goes, "No, no, 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 no. You don't die from diabetes. You die from the complications of living with diabetes. Diabetes is just the first domino. And when that domino falls and it triggers a whole collection of other dominoes, you die from those other dominoes. You die from strokes as a result of hypertension. You die from chronic kidney failure. You die from from liver failure, from liver cirrhosis, limb amputations, blindness, things like this, right?" I'm not trying to paint a gross picture here, but the truth is that these satellite complications of living with diabetes are really the things that will end up compromising your quality of life in the long term. And so it's really important to understand exactly what collection of metabolic conditions you're living with, because chances are those metabolic conditions have a link directly to diabetes and most importantly to insulin resistance. And when we can treat insulin resistance and start to reverse it in the same way that Robbie did, the same way that I've done, the same way that thousands of our coaching clients have done, then the magnitude and the severity of all these other satellite conditions starts to go down over time. And the beauty is that most of them can just disappear altogether. So if you're sitting here as an example saying, "Okay, I have type 2 diabetes and I'm hypertensive and I have high cholesterol and I may have fatty liver disease," separate them in your head, because the diabetes is caused by insulin resistance. So insulin resistance is setting the stage for diabetes, and it's increasing your risk for hypertension and potentially causing it. It's also causing high cholesterol. It's also potentially causing your fatty liver disease. So you can tackle all 4 of them at the same time simply by going backwards one step and saying, "What is this insulin resistance thing? How do I understand? How do I wrap my head around what insulin resistance is? And most importantly, how do I reverse it? How do I become insulin sensitive?" Because the minute you do, that's when everything starts to change for the better. Okay? So
couldn't have said it better. I mean, the list of people, these conditions, Cyrus. I mean, this is why we do what we do. Like,
exactly.
This is what we are so passionate about. I mean, fixing the diabetes numbers, that's actually the easiest part. But all the other conditions that are associated with it, and the fact that there's this one connecting point, this is so important.
Exactly. And I think that's something that most people in the world of health don't fully grasp. That's, insulin resistance is a controlling, I call it a central node. It's like the center of a hub. It's the hub of a wheel. And then you have all these spokes going out to all these different conditions. And if you just treat the hub and you really wrap your head around what it is and how to reverse it, then all of the other tangential, spokes can start to go down in severity. Second question for you guys, now that we understand what type of diabetes you're living with, what type of satellite conditions you could be living with, I want to know this. In the world of diabetes, there's a lot of confusing information out there. Just like Robbie said earlier, you go on the internet, you're told about a ketogenic diet, a low carbohydrate diet, a paleo diet, a low fat diet, a plant-based diet. Drink olive oil, drink coconut oil, don't do this, have this ketogenic thing. Okay? It's confusing. I want to know the number one most confusing thing for you. The thing that keeps you up at night, the topic that just frustrates you that you can't seem to find an answer for with regards to your diabetes health. What is it? Please type it in the chat box. I want to see exactly what it is right now.
Pick the biggest one. I'm sure there's a lot. We want to hear the biggest one. What one? Like Cyrus said, it's keeping you up at night, scratching your head. You just don't understand.
Okay, what to eat and how much? Conflicting medical advice. Why can't I lose weight? How much should I eat?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What is neuropathy? Can I eat sugar? Can't lose weight. Can't lose weight. What to eat to lose weight? Why do I keep gaining weight? Interesting. What diet can I eat to lose weight? Wow. Okay. How long will it take to get rid of insulin resistance? Amount of carbohydrate or carbs and fat per day. How to reverse diabetes and get off the medication that I'm on. Cravings. Carbohydrates or fat, which is worse for you? Okay, this is really, really, really interesting. Carbs or not? Okay. Losing weight, higher low glycemic carbohydrates. Okay, I see a lot of similarities here. Sugar, carbohydrates, lose weight. Okay. Is my insomnia causing insulin resistance? Very good question. Very good question.
Will keto hurt me?
Will keto hurt me? It's a great question. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, we just hit the 1,000 person mark. We're currently at 1,028 people. Give yourselves a round of applause.
The enthusiasm that you guys have and your dedication to figuring this out is fantastic. How many people out there are living with diabetes or have family members with diabetes and they're just not doing anything about it? They don't care. Like this is how we're gonna solve this epidemic. This is how we're gonna change the money that we're spending on healthcare. Like you guys actually interested, getting the information and making change. This is fantastic. Like this is unbelievable. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, so there's a lot of confusion here about exactly what to eat, exactly how much to eat, whether or not carbohydrates are healthy, whether or not fat is healthy, and the last one was, how am I going to lose weight? How am I going to stop gaining weight and lose weight for real in the long term? Okay, so this is a perfect segue, because the next question I want to ask you guys is actually a very, very, very important question. I'm going to put another poll up on the screen here if I can figure out how to do this. Okay. Here we go. What do you think would happen if you ate more carbohydrate-rich foods? A, my glucose would increase. B, I would gain weight. C, my insulin requirements would increase. Not necessarily injecting insulin, but even inside what your pancreas is making. D, my fasting glucose would increase. Or E, none of the above. Okay, let's see what these answers are. About 20% of you think that you would gain weight. Fantastic. About 20% of you think that your blood glucose would increase. And then about close to 10% of you think that your insulin requirements may increase. Okay.
Some people are asking a good question, Cyrus. They're saying it depends on the type of carbohydrates, simple or complex.
Well. Looks like we have some very astute students in the room today. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe we could be more clear. What do you think would happen if you ate more carbohydrate-rich foods from whole sources, like fruits and potatoes and quinoa and beans and rice? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2. Get voted if you haven't got it yet. And 1. Here we go. Okay, my blood glucose would increase. 20% of you. I would gain weight. 20% of you. About 10% of you think your insulin requirements would increase. And 10% of you think that your fasting glucose would increase. And then the overwhelming majority, 45% of you think none of the above. Okay. So the answer is, the most appropriate answer, the closest answer is E, none of the above. So congratulate yourself if you got that. But I gotta say, just like Robbie said earlier, there were some people saying, well, what kind of carbohydrate, right? The type of carbohydrate you eat matters. If it comes from refined sources, like breads and cereals and pastas and crackers and cookies and sugar-sweetened beverages, then either A and or B and or C and or D could occur and most likely will occur. In addition to that, not only the carbohydrate quality and type, but the quantity and type of fatty acids that you consume from food also determines it, okay? Now, maybe the cat's out of the bag. We are proponents of a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet. Let me say that again. Low-fat, plant-based, whole food diet. And all three of those are very important. The reason we say low-fat, and you guys are going to learn this in the summit as we go along for the next 10 days, is that low-fat is very important because people who consume diets that are high in fat have a very challenging time consuming carbohydrates. In other words, when your total fat intake goes up, especially if it comes from saturated fat, your carbohydrate tolerance goes down physiologically. And what that means is that your muscle tissue and your liver, namely those two tissues, have a reduced ability to import glucose from your blood when it appears. And as a result of that, you end up spilling glucose into your blood. And that's a problem because when you do, then your blood glucose goes high. So let me recap. People who eat high-fat diets lower their carbohydrate tolerance, and therefore glucose gets trapped in their blood. You end up with high blood glucose. If, on the other hand, you did the exact opposite and you lowered your total fat intake, as a result of lowering your fat intake, you gain carbohydrate tolerance. So the next time you go and eat carbohydrates from whole sources, the glucose molecules from those carbohydrates have an ability to enter tissues, namely your muscle and your liver, and when they can do that, your blood glucose goes down. So diabetes is not just about carbohydrates. That is a very, 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 very important thing to think about. Most of the diabetes world will tell you that it's all about carbs and sugar, and carbs and sugar, and carbs and sugar. That's the only thing that matters when it comes to your diabetes health. We are here to tell you that that is not a true statement. And if you really start to focus on why low fat, why plant-based, why whole foods, you'll start to really understand the true magic of plant-based nutrition.
I'm loving the questions that are coming in, Cyrus. I just wish, like over 1,000 people in this room, I wish we could just talk to every single one of them. Just be like,
I know. Wouldn't that be great?
Question. Here's what to do. Like, what's going on in your life? I mean, we are just so passionate about the coaching and the nitty-gritty details, but we're going to start off by getting people educated. That's what the summit is about. Mm-hmm. Your questions will be answered if you take the time to participate in the summit. Set some time on your calendar. You do not want to miss these interviews.
100%. Okay, so here's what I propose we do. I'm going to ask one more question, one more poll. I love getting feedback. I think it's fantastic.
This is great.
So I'm going to ask one more question here, and then maybe we can go into a little bit of understanding of how the summit's going to work over the course of the next 10 days, and when you'll get access to the speakers, what times of the day, when to check your email, et cetera, et cetera. So here's the first question. What type of diet are you currently eating? A, I'm an omnivore. B, I eat a paleo diet. C, I'm a vegetarian. D, I'm a vegan. Or E, I'm a carnivore. And when I say carnivore, yes, I do mean carnivore, like Tyrannosaurus Rex, like a cat. Straight up.
I have an option for low-fat, plant-based whole food. That's a last option that you can vote for.
Absolutely.
Let's see where people are at.
Okay. Keep those answers rolling in. I want to see this.
There is a distinction between low-fat, plant-based whole food and just vegan. There's a big spike in processed vegan foods out there, and there's a little bit of difference between a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, which you'll be under full understanding what that means after this summit. But I'm loving the votes that are coming in here. Lots of vegetarians, lots of vegans, lots of low-fat, plant-based whole food. This is great.
Look at that. Oh, I didn't even see the low. Whoa. I didn't even see that option at the bottom. It was cut off on my screen.
Yeah.
Okay. So look at this. We got about 20% of you are omnivores. And then we'll call it about 30% of you are either vegan or vegetarian. Holy shnikes. And then about 50% of you are low-fat, plant-based whole foods. Did you know that?
It's fantastic. I'm loving this.
I did not expect that at all. Okay. Now here's actually what's really interesting to me is that the paleo diet, is that literally at 0%? No, it's at like
It's either 10 or 0. We have to do some math here, add it all up and see what's left. Carnivore's at 0. I think you're right. Paleo and carnivore, I think, are at 0. So I think people in that category have selected omnivore.
So 46, 66, 80, 82, 80, 92. So it would be split. Wow, that is phenomenal. So I expected there to be more paleo eaters and more carnivores in the room. And the fact that you guys aren't kind of makes it feel like we're preaching to the choir at this point. Okay, but this is a good thing. This is a really good thing. Okay, I'm going to end the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, this is phenomenal. All right, so let's talk about how the summit's going to work, because the summit's going to follow a similar format as it has in years before, but things are slightly different. So I'm going to share my screen one more time, and let's see if we can. Robbie, can you see my screen right now?
Not yet. Not yet. Now it's coming up. Let's see.
What do you see?
Now I see the I see the schedule page.
See the schedule page. Okay, here we go. So every day you will receive either 1 or 2 emails in your inbox, and there will be a link that you can click. You click on that link, it'll take you to this page right here, and you will see it basically has the URL and some schedule. Okay, you can also get to this by clicking on the schedule button right up top here. And if you do that, you'll get to this page where you'll start to see the schedule of events. So this live kickoff webinar is happening right now. The replay will become available as soon as this is over. After that, every single day, there's going to be 4 new interviews that are released. So on tomorrow, March 7th, you will be able to access Neil Barnard, Michelle McMacken, Michael Greger, and Dean Anaisha Sherzai. So all 4 of these will become alive. If you wanted to watch any of these interviews, you simply click on the button that you want to watch. So let's say we wanted to watch Michelle McMacken. So I click on Watch Now, and it takes me to her speaker page. On this speaker page, I'll be able to click here and watch the interview with Dr. Michelle McMacken. If you're on the road or your computer doesn't support streaming video very well and you want to just listen to it, you can simply click on this play button. You want to learn a little bit more about Michelle McMacken, here you go. And then here's what we highly, highly, highly recommend. We want your comments, okay? We want to know what you thought about these interviews. So please, 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 when you listen to every single interview, please take a minute and write a comment right here in this box, okay? It's very important because we have a team of coaches and a team of very experienced, people in the plant-based whole food, low-fat plant-based whole food world. We want to understand exactly what you're thinking, what's confusing to you, and we're going to do our best to make sure we respond to as many of these comments as possible. So please, 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 please leave a comment on any page that you do could watch a video from. Even if you only watch 5 minutes of the video, it's totally fine. Okay, so every day, like I said, 4 new interviews are going to become available. As you can see here, these are coming soon. So if you click on these buttons, nothing will happen. But every day, 4 new ones will become green, and then so on and so forth. So you go all the way down, and on Sunday, March 10th, we're going to be having another Q&A webinar. So we highly recommend you sign up for that webinar. And in this webinar, we're going to be able to learn a little bit. You guys might have some questions. We'll talk about ways that we can improve upon, your understanding and your knowledge of how to reverse insulin resistance. Anything you have, you bring it to the table. We'll be here talking to you guys live. Monday, March 11th, we got more. March 12th, we got more. March 13th, we got more. March 14th, we got more. And then finally, we have a wrap-up webinar on Friday, March 15th. And again, we can answer more questions, and we can sort of recap everything that you guys have learned thus far.
And once any interview is live, it stays live for the remainder of the summit.
That's exactly right.
So we want during this event, we want you to really be able to take time and see these interviews. So definitely, literally block off time on your calendar to watch these.
And here's the thing, like we know you guys are busy. We know you have families and school and work, and most people don't have time to sit here and watch 3.5 to 4 hours of video per day for 10 days. We get it. We totally understand. There's a lot of information to be learned here in this process. And the truth is that you don't have to listen to every single one of these interviews. Choose the interviews that are the most important to you. And it's totally fine. It's totally fine. You'll see here at the top, there's this all access pass, or you can click over here or down at the bottom. If you are the type of person that wants to, takes time to learn and wants to learn over the course of time, if you want to own the videos, you want to own the audio files, you want to be able to learn this information over the course of weeks to months to years, take your time with it. It's totally fine. So what we'd recommend is clicking here, going to check out the All Access Pass, and picking up either a digital version or a physical version, as in DVDs that we will mail to your house. Either way, having this information at your disposal whenever you want it is a really, really, really powerful way to make sure that you understand this information and you know how to implement it. Okay, we've had people whose lives have been completely transformed simply by purchasing the All Access Pass and really getting involved in it and taking the time to go through this information as if it were like a college course. And when you do it, you're going to be greatly rewarded by what you learn.
Absolutely. And there's a couple comments coming in just to make it clear. So the summit, it starts tonight. So we kicked it off tonight. Now, the interviews, you'll get an email in the morning. So the interviews go live early in the morning, and you can go to that schedule page and you can see yesterday's, and then early in the morning, the new day's interviews will come, and then you can watch them all day, and they'll stay live the rest of the summit. Then the next day's interviews will all appear early in the morning. There's no like certain time of day you have to show up at this time of day to see the interview. So just want to make it clear.
When you wake up in the morning, hopefully you will have an email in your inbox. And that email, you literally just open the email. You can do it while you're making breakfast. Open the email, click on it, and then boom, now all of a sudden you have 4 brand new interviews to watch. Okay, so we're trying to make them ready for you guys early in the morning, and then that way you can watch them all throughout the day as your schedule permits.
And the length of the interviews are about 30 to 45 minutes. That's about where each interview is at.
Each interview is about 30 to 45 minutes. Exactly right. That is exactly right. Yeah. Okay, so what should we do? You got questions?
So do we have a spreadsheet for these questions, or should we just go pick some in the chat box?
Kaka, do we have a spreadsheet? It's in Slack, Robbie.
Okay. It was so funny. Cyrus was talking about like people watching the summit and then transforming their lives. We have had so many testimonials. We actually had one come in this morning about somebody just watching the summit interviews, learning, applying the information, and changing their lives. We had one person, Don, who we had never met. He watched the summit. He changed his life. This guy literally was told he needed 6 bypasses. And instead of opting for the bypass surgeries, he saw the summit, changed his life, and he has not had to have it. He reversed cardiovascular disease, changed his diabetes health forever, dropped his lot of medications, improved his A1C. It's fantastic. So if you watch these interviews and you take notes and take action, it can transform your life. No questions asked.
No question. No question about it. We see it all the time. You know what? Actually, I'll be honest when I say one of my favorite things to do is to go to a medical conference or, some type of vegetarian or vegan focused event and have somebody come up to me, tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, by the way, I did your program and I used to have type 2 diabetes. I don't have it anymore. Yeah, I did your program. I used to have prediabetes. I don't have it anymore. I did your program. I lost 75 pounds. I don't have hypertension anymore. It truly, I absolutely love it. It gives me a shot of dopamine every time I hear these stories. And the fact of the matter is they come in, multiple stories come in per day. It's almost overwhelming sometimes. So, if you're sitting there thinking to yourself this seems like a big hurdle and I've been living with diabetes for 20 years and I'm a lost cause, I'm too old. Please, none of that. We have people who are literally 70s and 80s starting this lifestyle and seeing tremendous improvement in their metabolic health. So regardless of where you sit right now, There's ways to improve your overall health, and we want to be able to help you educate yourself to put yourself on the right path.
Absolutely. Why don't we start with this question? Why would my glucose level be higher in the morning than when I go to bed at night? Seems like it should be lower after a 10-hour fast.
Okay, so Anthony, it's a great question. Anthony, part of the reason why this may be happening is because in the middle of the night, there's no food coming into your mouth. And so as a result of that, in order to maintain your blood glucose at an adequate level, your liver is drip irrigating glucose into your blood all night long. In fact, it's doing it 24 hours a day, but it's the only source of glucose into your blood while you're sleeping. So your liver is drip feeding glucose and saying, here's a little bit now, here's a little bit now, here's a little bit now. And your pancreas is also drip feeding insulin into your blood. And the combination of the two of those is supposed to keep your blood glucose real stable all throughout the night. Now, in people who are living with insulin resistance, especially insulin resistance of your liver, or if you've been diagnosed with fatty liver, okay, what ends up happening is that your liver starts to drip irrigate glucose into your blood at a higher rate. So rather than just putting a couple of glucose units per minute, it'll increase the amount of glucose that's going into your blood by like 30% or 40% or maybe 50%. So it starts to increase the amount of glucose it's putting into your blood. And your pancreas can't always recognize that to try and secrete a little bit more insulin to counteract that. And so you can think of it as though in the middle of the night, there's sort of a competition between what your liver is producing and what your pancreas is producing. And in the middle of the night, for a lot of people who are living with an insulin-resistant liver, your liver wins. And your liver ends up over-secreting glucose. And as a result of that, your glucose starts to go up and go up and go up. So you go to sleep with a glucose of 94 and you wake up with a glucose of 144 and you're like, that's weird. I didn't eat anything. That doesn't make sense, right? Because your liver is over-secreting glucose into your blood. As soon as you eat a meal, the next thing that could happen is that the minute you start to eat a meal, all of a sudden your blood glucose comes down. A lot of people see that. And the reason for that is the minute you start to eat a meal, that's an opportunity for your pancreas to secrete a good amount of insulin. So it secretes insulin into your blood, and now there's enough insulin in your blood to drive your blood glucose down back to a normal physiological level. And so it seems a little bit backwards that you would eat food and your glucose would go down, but that's usually what ends up happening. So the way to reverse that is to reverse insulin resistance of your liver. I'm not going to give you the answer, but if you pay attention to the summit, I'm sure you'll find it.
You'll find it. It's fun reading these comments that are coming in here. John said, my blood pressure was 108/68 last week at my doctor appointment. A year and a half ago, before mastering diabetes, it was 149/95. This program works. Fantastic.
Who was that now?
That was John.
Yeah, John. I'm loving it, buddy.
Okay, so what is the relationship of my daily blood sugar to my A1C? I sometimes freak out with a blood sugar of 120, and yet A1C is low.
Okay, so Deborah, great question. Your A1C is basically just a marker. It's a 3-month average of your blood glucose control. So think about it this way. Your hemoglobin A1C, what it's measuring is the amount of glucose that has attached to hemoglobin inside of your blood. So your red blood cells have hemoglobin, and the hemoglobin has glucose attached to it. The higher your blood glucose goes, and especially the longer the period of time that your glucose is high for, the more glucose attaches to hemoglobin. So really, when you go get your A1C measured, they're not measuring glucose in your blood. They're measuring how much glucose is attached to hemoglobin. And then that right there gives you an average indicator of whether your blood glucose control is okay or needs a little bit of work or needs a lot of bit of work, okay? So if you check your blood glucose and you see 120 or maybe you see 140, right? What you're doing is you're basically taking like a Polaroid snapshot, like what is it right now? What is it at this very moment in time, right? you're not. My guess is that you're not checking your blood glucose every second of every single day for 24 hours. If you did, what you would notice is that your blood glucose is changing over the course of time. So you might see 120 right now, and then you might see 104 later, and then you might see 167 3 hours afterwards, and then you might see a 92 in the morning. So it's changing over the course of time. But if you take a mathematical average of that, you can then translate that into what your A1C value would be. And that A1C value basically tells you approximately over the course of 3 months what's happening. So it's a long-winded way of me saying you can have relatively high blood glucose every so often and still get a good A1C. Okay, ultimately what you're looking for is a very good A1C, but as we've talked about in previous webinars, your A1C is important, but it is not the only thing to pay attention to. We say this over and over and over again. It's an incomplete indicator of your diabetes health. You got to take multiple things into account. Your blood pressure, your lipid profile. What is your A1C? What's your ideal body weight? How active are you? How high quality is your diet? Are you eating low-fat, plant-based whole foods? If the answer is yes to that, and the rest of these biomarkers are in line, then your long-term, your ability to live a long and happy life is maximized.
Okay, terrific. So we're getting some feedback from the team here that there's a lot of questions in the chat box about certain foods like rice, pasta, potatoes, oatmeal, and people are also trying to understand what our program is. Like, what is the Mastering Diabetes program that we keep referring to, Cyrus? So should we just give a quick summary of green light, yellow light, red light foods? Do you want to do that?
Sure.
Are we holding people in suspense until they watch the interviews?
Green light, yellow light, red light foods. Okay, give me 1 second here. And I can just pull up an image on the screen. Why don't you go through another question real quick and I'll do it.
Okay, perfect. So let's see. Let's see.
What's that?
Okay, I'm looking through the chat box here. I know Jose and Kylie are answering a ton of questions as they come in. I did see another person ask about how long the interviews are available. So once the interview goes live, it will stay available until March 14th. That is when the event ends. But again, if anybody wants, you want access to this stuff now and have lifetime access, you could just buy the all access pass. You could do that. Let me actually load a link for people who want to just click that link. That is going to be here. There we go.
So yeah, we've been getting some questions via email as well about if you want to purchase the all access pass, can you do it now? And the answer is yes. So on your screen, there's a box that might have just popped up, and you can click on that and learn more about the all access pass and see if it's the right thing for you. But we highly recommend it because it's the easiest way to learn. It's the easiest way to guarantee your success.
The transcripts are a nice benefit as well. So you get the digital transcripts, you have PDFs, and then you can also, if you get the physical product, you get a book mailed to you. And a lot of people like reading. That's the way they prefer to learn. So that's a good option. And we have people asking, what about raw foods? Does the diet need to be raw? That's going to be answered right now when we go through our traffic light system here.
You guys want to say hi to my cat real quick? I have 2 cats. One of them swallowed a cockroach the other day. She's not feeling that well right now, but she's still adorable. Blue, do you want to say hi to everyone? Say hi, buddy. She's grooming herself right now. She's just a little cutie.
She's too cute.
She's just the cutest ever. Okay.
Somebody's asking if we do. Unfortunately, we are not doing international shipping. It's cost prohibitive. So if you live internationally, we highly suggest buying the digital version.
Okay. Are you ready? I got my screen.
Let's do it. Go. Let's.
Okay. Sometimes technology even confuses me. Okay, here we go. You ready?
Let's do it.
We're going to go here. We're going to go here. We're going to go here. Then we're going to go here. What do you see?
Girish has their favorite cat sitting on their lap.
Who does?
Girish.
Girish. I love it.
Heidi loves your kitty.
Oh, thank you, Heidi. We love our kitty too.
My cat came to see your cat. That's too funny. All right. Here it is. All right.
Okay, you see this?
Yep. We have a simple system for teaching people exactly what foods to put in their mouth. Do you want to go through it, Cyrus?
No, you start with green and then I'll do yellow.
Perfect. So the green light category, the main teaching point here is that you can genuinely eat as much as you want of these foods. They are so high in water content and fiber content that it's very, very difficult. Exact opposite of what you hear in the world of diabetes health. You see, we're telling you can eat as much fruit as you want. You can eat as much starchy vegetables, potatoes, that's, yams, butternut squash, beans, lentils, and peas, intact whole grains. These are very carbohydrate-rich foods that are also loaded with fiber, loaded with water, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, phytochemicals, and they are low in fat. And that is what you're going to learn in this summit. We're going to go through a lot of the research that supports this. And of course, in the world of diabetes health, eating non-starchy vegetables, green leafy vegetables, herbs and spices, there's really no confusion about that. Everybody knows that. We don't need to go into such great detail, but you will definitely understand by the end of this summit why you can eat these carbohydrate-rich foods and see an improvement in your blood glucose levels, your fasting insulin levels, your energy, your overall health. You will learn that in the summit for sure.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so now when it comes to yellow light foods, you think of yellow light foods as foods that you can eat. We just recommend eating them in limited proportions. Because like Robbie said, the green light foods are the foods that are the most fiber rich, and they're also the most nutrient dense foods on the planet, meaning they have more micronutrients than any other food group. The foods in the yellow light category tend to be less nutrient dense, and some of them tend to be a little bit higher in fat or sometimes higher in refined carbohydrates. So this group includes things like nuts and seeds, avocados, coconuts, olives. Those tend to be higher in fat right here. These are plant-based fats, but they're still just a little bit higher. And then when it comes to pastas and pasta alternatives, they can be a little bit problematic for controlling blood glucose. And then sprouted breads also tend to be a little bit problematic as well. So again, if you want to eliminate these foods from your diet, that would be fantastic. Or if you want to just minimize them, that's completely acceptable and can certainly help you improve your insulin sensitivity at the same time.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to answer a few questions as they're coming in here. So somebody's asking, how do you match to insulin on green light foods? I think they're asking, if you're living with insulin-dependent diabetes, how do you figure out how much insulin to use when eating these foods? And that's a great question. We have a system where you can learn exactly how much insulin to use. It's called the decision tree, and we go through that in detail in our coaching program and help you really utilize that resource to figure out the proper amount of insulin. It's a very, very powerful tool. You can get it for free on our website. I'm sure Jose or Kylie can paste the link. So that's fantastic. What are your thoughts on organic versus non-organic? That's totally up to you. But if you have the resources and the availability, obviously organic is best. Nobody's going to argue that pesticides are good for anybody's health. But there's a lot of over-exaggeration of like, oh, it'd be better to eat, maybe an organic animal product versus a produce that has some, pesticide residue. It'd be much better to have produce. It's always better to have produce. So it's up to you based on your resources. Cyrus, you want to answer what is an intact whole grain?
What is an intact whole grain? Yeah, so an intact whole grain is basically a whole grain that's minimally processed. So take oats as an example. An intact whole grain is going to be something like oat groats. But oats can also be processed in many different ways. You can go from oat groats, which are intact, to something like steel cut, which is a little bit more processed. And then from there, you can go into the next level down after that is shredded. No, I think it's, it's, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like instant oats. And then after instant oats comes puffed oats. And then after puffed oats comes something else, oat flour, I believe it is. So there's a hierarchy. What we're recommending is to try and stay as high as possible and try and eat grains that are minimally processed because they maintain their highest nutrient density, and because they also contain a lot of fiber, which is going to help slow the rate of glucose absorption. You want to go through the red light foods, Robin?
Yes, so the red light foods here. Basically, animal products are out. We're going to go into detail about this in the summit. Very many experts talk about the science, about why it's best to minimize and avoid these foods if you can. Oils of any kind, those are the most refined foods on the planet. Or, I mean, sugar is also equally refined, but oil is one of the most refined foods on the planet. Taking out all the carbohydrate, all the fiber, all the protein, lots of the nutrients, you're basically left with nothing but fat. That is a problem when it comes to maximizing insulin sensitivity. Refined sugars are obviously out, packaged products. These are all the foods you want to avoid. Now, Cyrus, we do have a question about Dr. Gundry and lectins. Do you want to go over that?
Yeah, for sure. What's the question?
Question is, Dr. Gundry talks about poisons in nightshade plants, including legumes, potatoes, tomatoes, eggplants, and just about everything else I eat. What do you think about these poisons?
Okay. So yeah, Dr. Gundry wrote The Plant Paradox, and he basically uses some pretty effusive language in his book about how plants contain poisons, and these poisons are bad for you. They're going to cause inflammation. They're going to make you sick and die. Dr. Gundry likes to over-exaggerate things. There's no question about it. And unfortunately, or should I say fortunately, most of what he wrote about in his book has no evidence basis for it. Meaning that if you look it up in the research, what you'll find is that the stuff that he talks about isn't real. And I'm not trying to badmouth him. I'm just saying that's a true fact. So when it comes to foods that are in the sort of like nightshade category, okay, nightshades are a classification of certain types of vegetables that are high in their alkaloid content. Now, a small proportion of the population, I'm trying to remember the percentages, like 3 to 4% of the population at the most has a nightshade sensitivity or a nightshade allergy. And if you are one of those people, when you consume nitrate-rich vegetables, you'll know immediately, okay? You will either break out in a rash, you could get an inflamed GI system, you could end up with gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, abdominal pain, and it can be very uncomfortable. So if you do suffer from any of those reactions when you eat nightshade-rich vegetables, such as eggplant or tomatoes or tomatillos or white potatoes, there's a whole other collection of, I think it's like certain types of peppers also have them. If you eat those foods and then you end up with inflammatory conditions like I just talked about, then and only then is it worth reevaluating whether nightshades belong in your diet. If, on the other hand, you eat nightshade-rich plants and nothing happens to you and you don't have any overt symptoms of, in your GI system or on your skin, then there's no need to worry about whether or not nightshade vegetables are dangerous for you, because in reality, nightshade vegetables are very nutrient dense, and putting a blanket statement across to everyone saying don't eat nightshade vegetables because for a small proportion of the population they can be problematic. If you're trying to give that blanket recommendation to everyone, it's just unfortunately misguided. So hopefully that makes sense.
There it is. Okay, so we have a question. Somebody asking, how is fatty liver diagnosed?
Okay, good question. So fatty liver can get diagnosed via a number of different mechanisms. The most accurate way to diagnose it is using an ultrasound. So you'll go get a liver ultrasound, and they'll actually visualize your liver, and they can actually see that the liver size itself has increased over the course of time because the accumulation of fat actually increases the size of your liver, or you can end up with little fat nodules that are actually they look like little golf balls inside of your liver that can actually be an indicator of advanced fatty liver disease. But that doesn't always happen. A lot of the times, you can get diagnosed. Kylie, how else can you get diagnosed with fatty liver? Is that it? Elevated. Yes, thank you. You can get elevated liver enzymes. So there's two liver enzymes in particular, AST and ALT. And if those liver enzymes tend to be high, then that could be an indication that you're living with fatty liver disease. if your lipids are also high, meaning that if your triglyceride level is high, your total cholesterol, your LDL cholesterol, if those are elevated as well, it could be a sign that your liver is having a difficult time processing fatty acids, and as a result of that, they end up secreting more lipoproteins into your blood. So it depends on whether the analysis is like cursory or rigorous. The cursory is just looking at liver enzymes. The rigorous is doing an ultrasound. But at the end of the day, all of this relates to liver insulin resistance. And the higher the fat intake in your diet, especially saturated fat, the higher your risk for the development of fatty liver disease.
And we have a question in the chat box. Can fatty liver be reversed? We've seen that in several of our members of our coaching program, and you can find their testimonials on our website. So the answer is yes.
Yes, 100%. Go to our website, click on the blog, and then scan through the articles, and you'll find two people. One person in particular that's on there, his name is Raj, R-A-J. He reversed fatty liver disease, and there's a whole collection of people that are in the same boat as him.
Okay, there's some people asking about how much food they can eat from the yellow light category. And so to be clear, the yellow light category, like Cyrus was saying, it's about not eating, they're either highly processed or they're higher processed, more processed foods than green light category, or they're higher in fat. And so in the Master Diabetes program, we teach it's best to keep your fat intake to a maximum of 15% of calories of fat, or another easy way to think about it is just don't eat more than 30 grams of total fat. So how much of those yellow light foods can you eat? Well, the question would be try not to exceed 30 grams of fat. And you'd be surprised, like how much fat comes in just whole foods. So on a day personally where I'm eating nothing but green light foods, just that's it, green light foods, I'll get somewhere between 15 and 25 grams of fat without eating anything in the yellow light category. So that might be the case for you too. You just, using nutrition software can help you figure that out. But when it comes to some of the more low fat processed foods, how much of those can you eat? We like to say that we're not the food police. It's going to be up to you. You could, whatever it takes to reach your goals. If you're already at your ideal weight, you don't have any more weight to lose, maybe eating a little bit more bread isn't a problem. But if you're trying to lose weight, you're not achieving your goals, you're not losing, a pound a week or so, roughly around there, then it's time to maybe focus more on the green light food. So it's going to be totally personalized, and that's what we do in our coaching program. It's really help people work through these nuances in their individual life. Another question we have, Cyrus, is how do I know I have insulin resistance? What is insulin resistance?
Okay, so insulin resistance is defined as, if you ask me, what I will say is that the definition of insulin resistance is the storage of excess fat in tissues that are not designed to store fat. I'll say that again. The storage of excess fat in tissues that are not designed to store large quantities of fat. So when you accumulate fatty acids, especially saturated fatty acids, inside of your liver and your muscle, then those two tissues lose their ability to communicate with insulin very effectively. So the storage of excess fat inside of those tissues can block insulin signaling. And as a result of that, your pancreas has to make more and more and more and more insulin, and your insulin requirements creep up over time. Was the question what causes insulin resistance?
It's really just what is it and how do I know I have it?
Okay, indicators that you have insulin resistance include, number one, you could have highly variable blood glucose, meaning your blood glucose can swing by 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 points in a day. You could wake up with high fasting glucose today, and then it could be low tomorrow, and then it could be high the next day, and then it could be higher the next day. And it can be generally sort of difficult to control, number one. Number two, if you're living with insulin resistance, oftentimes your lipids get elevated, meaning your LDL cholesterol and your triglycerides can get elevated as well. Number three, if you're living with insulin resistance, oftentimes you can end up gaining weight. And you can end up being anywhere from 10 to 50 to 150 pounds over your ideal body weight. Number four, if you're living with insulin resistance, you can become hypertensive. Your blood pressure can go up. Okay. Number five, if you are living with insulin resistance, your A1C value, like we talked about earlier, can start to creep up over time. Ideally, you want it to be in the non-diabetic range, less than 5.7. But if you're living with insulin resistance, then your A1C value can creep up as much as 6, 7, 8, 10, 15. Okay, so if any or all of those are true, then chances are evaluating your diet and becoming as insulin sensitive as possible can make a big, big, big difference for you.
Fantastic. Okay, so we don't want to keep you guys too long. So Kylie and Jose have been answering a lot of direct questions in the chat box. So hopefully you got your questions answered directly. And we covered some extra ones here so everybody could hear the answers. And now I think we want to just give you a review of what's going to come up tomorrow, who the speakers are, and let's get ready. So the first one is like the legend himself, Neil Barnard. He's like the godfather of a lot of this stuff. He wrote a book about reversing diabetes, Dr. Neil Barnard's program for reversing diabetes. It's a fantastic book. And he's going to go into a lot of stuff Cyrus was just talking about. Insulin resistance, really what is it? Talking about the fat storage, tips on how to reverse it, and talk a little bit about the keto confusion as well. That's a big topic on the first day.
Fantastic. Okay, so right after, in addition to Dr. Neil Barnard, we're also going to hear from Dr. Michelle McMacken. Dr. McMacken is, we consider her a very good friend of ours, and she's going to talk about a little bit more about the scientific evidence against a ketogenic diet. And the reason we really wanted to talk about ketogenic diets is because they're very popular right now, and they're sort of being rebranded as the most effective approach for living with any form of diabetes. And Dr. McMacken has a very, very good grasp on the scientific research, and she goes into detail here about whether or not ketogenic diets make sense in the short term and or the long term.
You keep going, Cyrus.
Okay. After Dr. McMacken, we have Dr. Michael Greger. Dr. Michael Greger is another very good friend of ours. He is the founder of nutritionfacts.org. He also wrote a book called How Not to Die. It's a brilliant book. And he's coming out with a new book called How Not to Diet, which I think is going to be another fantastic book. So Dr. Michael Greger talks about the dangers of the ketogenic diet. Surprise, surprise. We met up with him at a conference not too long ago, and we were sitting there chatting with him about a number of things. And together we came up with a really, what we believe to be a pretty strong analogy for what ketogenic diets really are doing inside of your body. We go into a little bit of detail about that, but he's also just a really charismatic guy. He really cares a lot about teaching people the truth, and his interview is fantastic. And then last but not least, tomorrow we got Dean and Aisha Sherzai. Both of them are MDs. They're a husband and wife team. They're both neurologists. They work out of Loma Linda, California. Absolutely brilliant individuals. They're talking about the connection between a ketogenic diet and insulin resistance of your brain. Okay, so they are researchers who have a very strong understanding of how ketogenic diets not only affect your body, but they affect the way you think and your risk for developing either dementia or Alzheimer's disease later in life. So they're going to talk widely about that because Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline in general has become a very important topic in our world today. And it turns out that the food that you eat absolutely affects the way that your brain operates, not only today, but 20, 30, 40, 50 years into the future. So they go into a lot of detail about why that's the case and how you can maximize your brain function today and tomorrow.
It's going to be exciting, guys.
Super exciting. So thank you for showing up. We really appreciate you guys taking the time to be with us today. We have 2 more webinars. Again, the next one's on Sunday. Check your email, and you'll have an ability to register for that webinar in the same way that you registered for this one. And then we also have another one the following Friday to sort of recap the whole thing. But we're going to walk through this summit with you day by day by day. And again, like I said earlier, leave comments in that comment box. Every single comment that you write, our team looks at. We look at them, we monitor them, we scan them, and we're going to be here to try and help you guys out as much as possible. So please don't be shy. Please, if you have something that's on your mind, whether it's constructive, whether it's confusing, it doesn't matter. Put it in that comment box. and we'll do our best to learn from it, try and help you out as much as possible.
Excellent. I think we answered as much questions as we possibly could. Cyrus or Jose and Kylie were all over it. So if there's anything we missed, like Cyrus said, write to us on Facebook and we'll get back to you.
100%. And I would like to thank Kylie Buckner, my wife, and Jose Tejero, who is not my wife, both of them for taking the time to be here with all of us today. They've been answering questions like at turbo speed behind the scenes. Thank you, Kylie. Thank you, Jose. And we appreciate all of your hard work. Thank you again for showing up today, and we will hopefully see you guys in the next Mid-Summit Q&A on Sunday.
Bye, everybody.